Hi, Anna Porter here. Today I want to have a chat to you about some of the craziness we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis in the property game. So this is a bit of an interesting story, a funny story, but also it has some real meaning behind it. So we had an issue just this week where one of our clients purchased a property. We helped them purchase a really great investment interstate. And in the contract, we didn't see that the agent had ticked that the pot plants were included in the sale. Now, not really a significant item or a significant issue. These are sort of Bunnings style pot plants. And the contract went off and the buyer's bank's solicitor, right, so the buyer's bank's solicitor picked up that there were pot plants included in the sale and sent an email across and said, could you please exclude the pot plants? They're not a fixture to the property. We can't lend on pot plants. So we thought, okay, not a hard problem to solve. Went back through the process, got them taken out of the inclusions and then sent it all back. Then what you wouldn't believe happened is the solicitor, and I'm guessing maybe a rookie solicitor, came back to us again and said, so thank you for taking the pot plants out of the sale, but obviously the sale price included the pot plants, so you have to reduce the sale price for the value of the pot plants because you're not getting them anymore. So after we all finished shaking our head, we said, well, they're worth like $10. Like, yeah, they're pot plants. They're nothing special. So we went back and explained, no value in the pot plants, not a fixture. We understand that. Excluded from the sale, it doesn't affect the price. And they said, no, not good enough. You have to actually adjust the sale price. Now, this is becoming more complex and a lot harder to deal with now. And they're talking about delaying settlement. There being penalty costs. This is starting to become a real problem for the client. So because we're all a team of valuers, and sometimes this is where having valuers and people that come from a really extensive property background behind you can help in this process because, real estate's a big transaction. So we said, well, being valuers, we know that the bank would have had a valuation done and that valuation would only be based on the fixtures, not anything that's not fixed to the property. So our best guess, our educated guess would be the valuation that you as the lender has on file would exclude the pot plants and that would be the value. And I would say it would marry up with the sale price of the property. So refer back to the valuer. Base your lendings off that, excluding pot plants. I reckon that the lender would have actually requested the valuer note the valuation excluded pot plants. So when they got that request, I'm sure there's a nice giggle around the valuation office too, to be honest. And then we don't need to adjust the sale price. So lo and behold, that all went to plan and we avoided delays, settlements, penalty fees and all that sort of stuff for our client. But it's interesting just some of the most ridiculous and out-of-the-box stuff that we come up against on a day-to-day basis. And, the poor client didn't really understand what was going on or how to fix it or where on earth the solicitor was coming from. It was such a random request. But luckily our background expertise allowed us to fix it really quickly. So interesting story. The reason I tell you this story is it actually brings up some interesting points around what is a fixture to the property. So we often see people buying holiday rentals or serviced apartments that include furnishings, so lounges, TVs, cutlery, plates, all that sort of stuff. And when they go to get the valuation done by the bank, the valuation's at a lower amount than what they've paid for it because they've included all these things in the sale or in the purchase. Often we see purchases that sometimes include artwork and things like that, and sometimes it can be very valuable artwork. And the bank won't lend on that because it's not a fixture. So if you can imagine you buy a property for $450,000, $50,000 of that is for the furnishings, and the bank lends on that, then you suddenly pick up all those furnishings and take them to another house. The bank's not going to give you the money for that. So the valuation will marry up with what the property's worth without those items, and that's under the bank's instruction. And it's interesting, people often criticise valuers for being conservative, and yes, there are some out there that are certainly conservative, I don't deny that fact, but there's also sometimes a disconnect between what the valuation is based on and what the client thinks it's based on, and that can be sometimes where the conservative critique comes from because there's actually a disconnect in what the definition is. It actually takes me back to a really precedent-setting case that I know about. So when I was the valuer, we looked at this case. Actually, when I was teaching at TAFE as well, we studied it a little bit about what is a fixture of the property, because there's this landmark case down in the Wollongong area many years ago. The case actually went on for about 5 or 6 years, where a developer went in and developed a new housing estate with pre-manufactured homes. homes. So they've been built off site, bought to site, but then they were plumbed in, they had verandas put on them, some were bricked in, they had electricity connected, and they looked like they were fixtures to the site. Under the DA, there was reference to things like the Caravanning Act and whatnot, and he marketed it as a retirement estate, so it was marketed to retirees. Anyway, long story short, very complicated case, but what actually happened was the house and the land were sold separately. So I think he still owned the houses, the original developer, and the land was sold off to individuals, something along those lines. There's a few different structures inside the estate as well. But what ended up happening was the bank didn't have security over the house and the land. They only had security over the land. And in some instances, the houses were actually removed or could be removed, or there's rent being charged for the actual houses. So what that meant was when the bank thought the house and land together was worth, say, 500 grand, if you take the house out of that valuation, the land might have only been worth 200 or 250. So when they looked at this over hundreds of properties in the estate, they were short on security. They had to sell it all up, which in the end they had to, because the developer took the bank's money and nicked off. Shock. It was a bit dodgy how it was all set up. Took the bank's money and nicked off. Then they didn't have enough security, and all these, older retirees as well had kind of been swindled a little bit or deceived in that process. So the bank was suing the valuers, saying, you should have told us that the houses weren't fixtures to the land, and the valuers are saying, well, but they are. They're bricked in, they've got verandas, they've got, all these things that make them fixed to the land. You can't just pick them up and move them without causing damage to them. So it actually set some precedents, and it was a really big ongoing battle around what is a fixture to the land. When does something become fixed to the land and it becomes one in terms of value? It was a really, really interesting case to look at, very complex, a lot of layers to it. In the end, what came out of that was once something has sustained significant damage, to remove it from the land, it then becomes a fixture. So if it's been bricked in, I think they ended up deciding something like the ones that have been bricked in, to remove them, significant damage, they were considered a fixture, so the values weren't in the wrong there. There were a couple, though, in the estate that weren't as fixed. They were more sort of plonked on the site and actually wasn't that hard to come and move them to another site. They were considered not to be fixtures to the land. So it became very interesting. And now you'll find as well, if you're looking at buying a property, it's a pre-manufactured home, lenders are really sketchy around them and a bit nervous around them, and so are valuers, because it creates some issues around the lending structures of them. So if you're looking at building a house and you're thinking pre-manufactured homes that actually come to site, two pieces and get plonked together, and then you can actually pick them up and move them off site and take them somewhere else, you have to be a bit careful about how that's approached, because it can have an impact on your lending capacity too. And with an evolving construction world where a lot more things are being done off site and brought onto site and sort of prefab, pre-manufactured, there's now some grey area around the definition of what is actually a mobile home, a pre-manufactured home, what can actually be removed, what can't, and what becomes a physical structure. So the valuation definitions have been set, but then the construction industry is changing and evolving too. So really interesting space to watch. But just a little heads up, and probably my tip for today, if you are buying a property that does come with things that are not fixtures to the property, like furniture, lounges, artwork, and you expect them to be included in the bank's lending structure, LVRs, and the valuation, they probably won't be. So you have to make sure you've got that extra money set aside for that. So anyway, guys, have a great day. Happy house hunting.